there is a sexual dimension to the practice. And opening up to that, in terms of just sex, is to reduce it to something much smaller than it really is. It's a sense of bodily ecstasy, really, but subtle. It's not like wild, it's subtle. Fulfillment, happiness, joy. But it has this quality of interpenetration. I mean, penetration is a sexual word, isn't it? But I mean, it's a quality of this interpenetration of form and emptiness, or form and nothingness. It's a play. In Hindu, they have this idea of lila. It's like a play where something arises and it passes away. So it's like form and emptiness. When that truly interpenetrates through this act of embrace, then you've got a real connection to it. Now, when we don't have that real connection to it, we can get a sort of an eroticizing of the understanding faculty. And so we love understanding. And there's a huge amount of that goes on, because this more instinctual, what you might call lover capacity that gives rise to the sense of fusing with nature is quite suppressed in our culture, and it can be certainly suppressed in right from when we were very young. You know, maybe we didn't want to embody that joy, that happiness, because it's just so out of step or out of sync with the misery that surrounds us. But it's almost like an excitation, so there's a quality of excitation, and this quality of excitation is also what's in the nervous system. You know, actually wants to open to that embrace, but it doesn't feel safe to do so because it's judged it as being out of keeping with normality. And so part of what we're doing when we are sitting is it's daring to feel these things, or these feelings that we may feel are kind of outside of the norm, but they're not really. So a lot of monks would get quite sick in the first few years. It wasn't uncommon, because if you're celibate and you've not got a sex life, you don't know what to do with it. But if you're a bit more daring, then you are able to open up to it. You recognize, well, actually, you know, the energy that we get so sort of focused on sex about, actually it permeates everything. And meditation then becomes a very erotic, for want of a better way of putting it, a very erotic experience. Ultimately, it pierces the heart center, and it becomes a sort of more refined than physical eroticism. But it has that component to it, and so for a lot of us, it's a very depressed or unconscious part of the practice. So the practice just becomes about this sort of sense of stillness and a sense of clarity sometimes, and then a sense of just bearing with kind of greyness. And so just want to put that into the mix. You're never going to understand it. No. Your understanding is going to get shattered. In the end of the day, they've just discovered the universe, by the way, in science, they've just discovered the universe is infinite. They believe they've proven that, whether or not it's actually true is perhaps scientists have got it wrong, but they believe they've proven the universe is infinite. And now they're speculating and looking for evidence that this is one infinite universe amongst an infinite number of other infinite universes. Is even quite hard to describe the concept. So that's the scale. Now, if you think you're separate from that, you're not. You are participating in it. And if you sensitize yourself to your life, you're going to start becoming attuned to that infinity for real. And that's beyond anything that your concepts can cope with. In a sense of doctrine can't really cope with it. I mean, the doctrine and teachings and everything, you know, it's all thrown out there as an aid, but no words are sufficient to really do the trick. And in a way, it's kind of why I'm quite a sort of slippery. When I talk about these things, I tend to quite intentionally be a little bit slippery, because in the end of the day, to me, if you need a technique or a method, you can always find it in a book. But I'm really trying to point towards this process of points of reference dropping away, because it's almost like the vitality of our lives comes from the sky, doesn't it? It's where the sun shines, the light shines, and that light brings life to everything. If there's absolutely no light, then there'd be no world. Similarly, the vitality of our lives comes from the sky-like mind. Just like the sky, it has no quality of thingness. But it's bright and vital and responsive and embraces everything equally. And then there's that play of earth, between sky and the earth and the light and objects that strike it, and it's an analogy, a metaphor for the interior experience too. So you may think that you'd be disorientated without having all this kind of clever thoughts about what's what and all this information about it. But what you discover is that you've got a spontaneous insight that arises that's much fresher and much alive once you begin to trust that you're in possession of that, and that it's not that someone else is in possession of it and you need to get it. You'd be amazed, like half of what I've said today I've never even said before. You'd be amazed at what comes out when you take the brakes off. What you already know, the wisdom that's already within you. The last thing Ajahn Cha said before he disappeared, the issue with Westerners is they give their authority away too easily, and they don't take the authority, don't believe that you have Buddha, Dharma, or whatever, however you want to express it, already operative within you.
This connection.
Yeah.
According to my experience, it has been possible to reach with breathing exercises, with dancing,
Sure.
with opening the body, and not with sitting.
Yeah.
It can happen like bliss. It has a lot to do with letting go of.
My partner, she did ballet for 18 years, and she always says dance is my way, and so I guess people have different inclinations, but there's something interesting though about just sitting absolutely still, because in a sense it is the epitome of no escape, and there's very little room for modifying or changing anything other than letting it go. So even if you find a sense of release or whatever through dance, there's nothing more honest than just sitting.
Breathing.
Well, anapanasati is mindfulness of breathing. That's what the Buddha taught. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are all premised on the mindfulness of breathing, and pana means prana, so it's basically the gentle stimulation of the prana. If you thinking in terms of the yogic language, it is a form of working with the prana, because the stillness aspect is so important and the no escape aspect is very important. It's a way of checking in to see what's really going on, because there is no room for modification, no room for change. Whereas when you're dancing, it's very hard to know exactly why you're moving in a particular way and everything, and it has its validity because you can learn to bring that pity, that joy, that ecstasy. You can learn to begin to embody it. But I would suggest it's probably quite skillful to balance it with period of stillness, because
Stillness comes.
Stillness comes.
Yes, that's my experience. I never trusted those experiences because I never had really saying it's okay to do it, but I've experienced so much, and it can become very, 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 very still.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about just sitting absolutely still is that there is a process of intensification, and so it can reveal to us how able we are to sustain that stillness in the face of inescapable intensification. So I think there is a wisdom to the sitting practice. And you say that you find it doesn't work, or imply that maybe it's not working as well for you as another practice, but it may be that it's just more difficult for you than the other practice.
I have found these spontaneous movements from my body, spontaneous breathing, and spontaneous stillness. And then I got a yoga teacher who told me to do this and this and this and that. So I lost my own way of exploring, and I started to do what you call willful practice, going to one posture, and I sort of
locked up.
I never came back to this possibility again. I haven't found it. With sounds also, I feel it can be a very channel to... Well,
you're clearly got all sorts of strings to your bow, and you should, I would never let anyone tell me what I should give up or not give up. I mean, nobody's got a clue. I don't care how enlightened they are. So,
but it's not so easy when you're alone. And you have all this.
All I would suggest is that certainly not to abandon anything, but you can always. The thing with the sitting is that it's always a good way of checking in to see how honest we're really being. Because if we're truly at ease with ourselves, then we should be able to sit still. It's this very simple thing. It's not a complicated thing to sit still, is it?
No, I like to sit still.
Yeah.
For me, it's not
And it will reveal to us whether or not we are at ease with ourselves and at ease with life. Simple as that. And it's a very direct measure of whether or not that is the case.